My name is Coco Madari. My pronouns are they, them. And we have Rebecca Quave, and we're going to be talking about how love is the key to the revolution. Um, I know I myself am a huge activist and am always looking for ways to how to further the cause and further the expansion of the human species. And Rebecca and I are going to be talking about how love is the key, and how do we embrace love? How do we step into that so that we can embody the future that we want to create? So I think for starters, there are lots of misconceptions about what love is. And Rebecca has been studying this for 17 years. And so I wanted to ask you, first of all, what are the misconceptions of love? And with respect to activism and moving the world forward.
Yeah. So, and I wouldn't necessarily call it studying it for all that time, right? Because I did spend a lot of years studying a lot of things, and it mostly left me in a lot of frustration. So,
Mm.
in my experience, the things that you really take in an experiential way, that you get an experience of firsthand yourself, are so different than what we get from a mental study or an intellectual understanding. Not that those things aren't
Mm.
helpful, right? Because that can point us in a direction. So, like, if you don't know what an orange tastes like, there's nothing I can tell you about an orange that's going to give you the experience of the taste of an orange. At the same time,
Yeah.
that intellectual description, like if I'm just wandering the produce section in the grocery store to get a taste of an orange and I don't even know what I'm looking for, I haven't even seen a picture of it, you haven't even given me an intellectual description, then I'm going to find that a lot more challenging, right? So they're both valuable, but like I said, one is no substitute for the other. So as far as the
Yeah.
misconceptions about love, um, in general, first of all, when I talk about love, very oftentimes the first thing people want to relate to is a sense of romantic love, or even a sense of um, an intense feeling of that is my favorite, right? An intense like for something, an intense feeling of choosing that first is what most people sort of relate to as love. And so that gets misunderstood in the context of what you're bringing here today in terms of activism, in that then people misunderstand that, oh, well, if I were to love something, that means I would want it to continue, right? It would mean that I'm choosing that and prioritizing that and making that my favorite. So why would I love and bring love to these things that clearly are not okay and not the way forward and not harmonious and not what we want to keep doing, right?
Yeah.
But love, the way I'm using the word love, is an incredibly powerful energy that brings harmony anywhere it goes. It is a boundless, unconditional, all-embracing energy that has no opposite. That's what I'm referring to when I use the word love. So when that is increased in any situation, then harmony prevails, right?
Mhm.
And when you're referring to activism, that's always what the activism is about, right? It's always in some form or another to bring about a situation that's more harmonious than what the situation had been. And so
Yeah.
a lot of times there's the idea that the way to that is um, a lot of anger, for example. And it's understandable why people think that, because anger has more energy behind it than apathy or fear, right? If you just lie down and give up, then then change is not going to happen. And that's another big misunderstanding about love, is the idea that acceptance is equivalent to resignation, right? So I'm not talking about just getting resigned about something. But when you bring this energy of acceptance and love to something, then you're in an incredibly powerful position.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Um, yeah. And like with respect to like studying it, when I said that, what I thought in my head was like kind of like experimenting with, because
Ah,
listening to, your videos and stuff like that, you talk about being like, oh, I'm going to experiment with feeling this feeling, and when my body is telling me, or when my mind is telling me, whatever it is, to like reject it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so it's kind of like that internal study. That's what I was thinking about.
Oh
But
yeah, and I
yeah,
definitely relate to that, to the idea of experimentation. It's funny,
yeah.
I guess for me that word study carries so much because,
But you're right about that too. Totally.
my with my background being so intellectual and so academic, right, and really thinking that I could find answers in books, and then being
Mm-hmm.
genuinely disappointed when I came up empty-handed.
Yes.
That's
Yes. Well,
it's
it's
the first
interesting
connotation
because
that comes to mind for me with the word study.
yeah. Well, that it's interesting because I just started a job this week, and my bosses, who are also like married, we're talking about so they're very like they like to keep track of things, very organized. And so they literally have like a list of words and like their definition of what that means, because everyone can have like a different understanding of like whatever words. So that's funny. Um, yeah.
It's true.
And
I would imagine there's a lot of miscommunication, misunderstanding that they don't fall into because they have predefined things.
exactly. Yeah, so valuable. Yeah, and just to your point about bringing acceptance and that being a super powerful thing, the way that I experience love and how that turns into um activism, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be action that follows it, but rather an energetic shift that creates ripples
Yes.
throughout your life, affects the people around you, and changes dynamics. Like, there's been so many times where I've been in like this sort of energetic tension with someone, as like, humans being humans, that happens all the time. But then when I resolve it energetically, right, and like feeling my feelings around it and all of that stuff, then something shifts, and like no words have been spoken, no action needed to be taken. um so that's kind of my lens on it, is that love is an energy that embraces all of your feelings about things. So when it comes to like injustices in the world, love does not erase your feelings of rage, of sadness, of despair, of whatever it is, right? But it allows you to feel them even more deeply and even more of like a real way, while also not letting it completely destroy you and consume you, and it being a way for you to access even more power and joy, and that joy and that love, like true, all like embracing all of you, is that powerful force in activism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, and I completely agree with, and I've experienced it many, many, many times at lots of different levels, what you referred to, of the power of love, even when
Mm.
we don't externally change anything, right? And so what I see people fall into a lot of times is not embracing both sides of that, right? So either not acknowledging that that's possible and thinking that some external change always has to happen, and negating the power of, like you said, that a shift in energy happens, and without lifting a finger, harmony has come into place, right? And things have changed. And a lot of people, I mean, probably anybody who's here listening to either one of us, right, are in a position where they've experienced something like that, right? That you had a, like you said, had a gripe with somebody, you sit down and you get clear and loving about it. The next thing you know, your phone pings and you have a text from them that sounds completely opposite of how they had sounded before, right? So there's that. And then, but sometimes then people go the other way. They get so rooted in that they think that to take any action is a betrayal of that, right? And love has no limitation. Love excludes nothing. So love is happy for this change to happen, the shift to happen without you having to take any action. And love is fine also taking action, right? And but at the point when you take action that's already rooted in love, when you've already made that energetic shift that you referred to, that's now a completely different quality of action than what it was when what was motivating the action was anger, or what was motivating the action was fear, right? Or despair or whatever. And as far as those feelings, like you said before, that you're able to actually feel them even more deeply, it's all about the freedom of movement of the feeling, right? So fear isn't an issue. Being stuck in fear that isn't moving is difficult. Anger arising, rage coming forth is not an issue. That's perfectly, natural when you see some of the things that are going on in the world. But that sticking in place and you letting that animate you, letting that inform your action, isn't helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was just reflecting as you were talking about this on reactive anger, like taking action from a place of anger that hasn't been acknowledged and poured love onto. Like, for example, a post that I recently made about people, predominantly white women, who post about, oh, if you're in debt, then you're like, it's from toxic lust or toxic whatever, or, blah, blah, blah. And I was seeing this more often on my feed. And it was like, I started to get angry. And I think, and I did make that post angry, like I was angry. However, I actively allowed myself to be angry and be seen in my anger.
Yeah. So that's what I was referring to. Your anger was in free movement, right?
Exactly.
Your anger was flowing. It wasn't sitting on top of you and you like feeling prisoner to it and typing out your post from there.
Exactly.
That's the difference.
It felt free to move for sure. And it also felt like I was going to stand by the action that I took, no matter how anyone was going to respond to it. Like, it felt vulnerable.
Yeah.
That anger felt vulnerable.
That feels like you sort of bridged, that maybe it started in anger, and then as the anger moved so freely, you were more courageous and just feeling free to speak your mind and to say, no, this is not the way it is. Right. Because I mean, I saw something recently about and I forget how many years into the company it was, that Steve Jobs sent an email out to all the employees saying that Apple had its first day like in the clear, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
that it operated as an enormous company in debt for, forever. And nobody, and he's held up like some kind of, business hero or something to people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So to tell women specifically, especially, right,
Yeah.
that like, oh, you just, it's like a toxic thing if you have any debt. That's it sounds very uh elitist, honestly.
Totally, totally elitist. And yeah, yeah, I love what you said about like the anger feeling like this weight on you. And when I'm in that like reactive anger, then I'm kind of like in a burn everything down mode.
Yeah.
But then I always regret the decisions that I make within that versus when I'm in that book, oh, I'm feeling angry and I'm like like feeling it, processing it
Yeah.
and loving myself in that mode because we all have it. We all have so many different faces and so many different versions of ourselves. When that was actively loved upon, then the action I took was totally different and something that
Yeah.
I stood behind, and I'm very proud of that post actually. And there's lots of times where I did do some stuff like that, but there's also times where I definitely took,
Yeah, so that's the key, right? Is that it's
Mm.
free moving, and that you
Yeah.
are recognizing the simultaneous presence of love, right? So
Mhm.
whether it feels like it's a weight on you that you're trapped under, or whether you're trying to trap the anger and keep it down, either way,
Right.
it's not moving. And that's actually more dangerous. The most dangerous person to be around ever is one who will not allow anger,
Mhm.
right? Because that means they're sitting on it, they're holding it down with all their might, and at some point they're gonna blow, and it's gonna be completely uncontrolled,
Yeah. Totally.
right?
Totally.
So, and that's something that so many people have a misconception about, right? You might know somebody who will fly off the handle and then be fine 5 minutes later, right? And again, that's not to say it depends on what flying off the handle entails, right? What I mean is just if they just give a little
Yeah.
bit of a
Well, it's
gripe, right?
also, yeah, like a societal thing too. Some people are more allowed to express anger than others and, all of
Exactly.
that kind of stuff. And
Exactly.
but one thing that came to me when you were talking was how can you create a movement when you won't allow your feelings to move,
Ah, yeah.
right? So like how you allow your feelings to present themselves and move and shift internally, that internal world will be reflected in your external world.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that and what it takes to be able to do that is a complete how do I describe this? Um a refinement of your understanding of what your feelings are, right? So most
Hmm.
people understand their feelings as divided into different categories, good and bad and positive and negative, and so even with the idea of love, there's generally an understanding that, okay, well, if I want to feel more love, what I have to do is if I want to feel more peace, if I want to feel more joy, I have to feel less fear,
Mm,
less anger, less grief, less
mm,
shame, less sadness, whatever, because those are automatically perceived as opposites, right? And again, the love I'm referring to has no opposite. So the love I'm referring to exists at the center of every single moment, every single breath, every single feeling, every experience that you could possibly have. So that's another place where I see people get a little bit tripped up, is getting into sort of I think they call it toxic positivity, spiritual bypassing, that kind of thing, right? But it's
yeah.
what it is essentially moving into an even deeper rejection of what you've classified as bad or wrong or negative in the name of being more loving. And meanwhile, that's less loving, because love itself doesn't reject any of your experiences, any of your feelings, because love is what it's all made of. Love exists at the center of it all. So that recognition of love in everything, then that's why it makes that state so powerful, because it's incredibly powerful to not need to avoid anything, to not need to reject anything, right? To be able to walk through any experience and bring peace to it, to bring love to it, to bring harmony to it.
I feel like when we do these lives, we should just like have a sheet that has the definitions and like the basic,
Maybe that's why you brought
principles.
up your bosses having that. So
Right?
yeah,
Because I feel like
a little cheat sheet of like what
little
our
cheat sheet.
starting point is for everything.
Exactly. I feel like that's so important and so valuable, so that we can continue to like evolve and like advance these concepts and have that like basic framework there. So love exists at the center of every feeling. And one thing that I love to ask myself whenever I'm feeling anything is like, what is this bringing me?
Yeah,
This is here to give me some sort of gift. Like, oh, I wonder what that gift is.
exactly. And approaching your feelings with, and all of your experiences with that kind of curiosity is what I always encourage. And again, that's where a lot of times, if people have been exposed to certain teachings about the power of love or the power of peace, or, or they've decided that they want to be more positive or something, that can happen as well, right? Where you, the curiosity goes away. It becomes a search and destroy mission of, okay, what's in my subconscious that's wrecking my life? I need to pull it all out and throw it in the trash and be more positive. And now that's has nothing to do with how love operates.
Yeah, totally. So let's just, I want to ask for like a little bit of clarity for someone who might be wondering this, is how would someone say, if they're like thinking about the injustices of the world, or something's happened to them, right? Like a trans person, queer person, they just experienced like a microaggression or whatever, they're feeling anger, maybe betrayal, sadness, whatever. What would be the actual process that someone could go through in order to fully experience that feeling and recognize the love that exists there at the same time?
So I'd love to walk us through that right now. And I want to do this with the caveat that this doesn't mean that I'm saying that the burden is exclusively on each person to just handle their feelings while the world continues to attack them and treat them like crap.
Totally. And I also want to say too, to that point, is that depending on your human design, some people actually process feelings or make decisions through the help of either one other person. So if you have split definition, then you process your like feelings and information best with another person to like mirror and talk back to you. If you're triple split, then it's multiple people. If you're single definition, then it's like a little bit more internal. So yeah, it also depends on like the kind of person you are. But yes, feeling does not happen in silo.
Yeah, exactly. So what I can do is, sort of give the overview of what we're doing, where it's going, what the process is, so that you can do that more on your own, if that works for you, like you said it does for some people, or if you're going to play this back so that you can let me walk you through it in that two-person way. if you have someone that you work with in an ongoing way, one-on-one, like you or I, right?
Mhm.
Are both available for things like that. Or if, like you said, you work best in a group of people, in a setting, like I know you have something brewing that you're going to be bringing, or something like Soul Oasis that I have that's ongoing, where we get together in a group and walk through these things. So would you like to sort of be the pace car for that, or would you like me to make it something kind of generalized?
What does that mean, pace car?
Oh, just like the guinea pig, so to speak.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, good. So, and everybody follow along and bring, whatever it is that's meaningful to you in this moment. So it doesn't even have to be something that you've experienced personally, right? It could be something that you witnessed, or you saw happen on Twitter, or you read about, and you notice that this feeling arises in you of like, this isn't right and there's nothing I can do about it, or this isn't right and there's something I have to do about it. But you're not in touch with the peace or the love there yet. Okay. So for you, Coco, nice deep breath. And
Also, side
everybody,
note,
yeah.
I always knew that like being coached live was going to be in my future. This is just, yeah, so that's fun. Anyways.
Okay, cool. Like I said, I can just give us something general if you prefer. It's
Yeah, no,
totally
no,
your
no.
call. Okay.
I'm down. I'm down.
Okay, good. So everybody listening, go ahead and make sure that you bring a few nice, deep, gentle breaths into your body in a way that you're intentionally allowing your body to open up and receive everything that's brought with your breath. So allow all of the love and nourishment, all of that expansiveness, all of the ability to just sort of fall open that comes with your breath. Just let your breath move into your body and let your body relax into receiving everything that your breath brings to it. And something you can always do in a pinch, right? If a feeling is feeling overwhelming, is just pick places in your body and just ask yourself, can I feel my breath all the way there? And even if it just seems like you're imagining that, it's still going to do the job, right? So for like right now, what if your breath moves into your left pinky toe? Just let your breath move all the way through your body, all the way down into your left pinky toe, and see what it brings there. And let your breath move all the way through your body into your right pinky toe. And just notice how all different parts of your body start to open up and relax into that. Okay, so bring into your attention that the moment that you experienced or witnessed, and how when you felt in that moment, whatever it might have been, are you able to see that part of what you were experiencing is that you felt in that moment that you were separate from love?
Are you talking about something specific happening in my body right now?
No, I mean, like you said, like if someone is experiencing this, different types of injustice and mistreatment and so on, right? So like if someone calls you a slur online or something, the reaction to that is usually going to involve in some way that you feel separate from love, because that's what that person is looking to have you feel, right? They're
Mhm.
telling you you're something that isn't allowed to be loved.
I could bring something up that like could happen that like I actually um had a bit of like Because I am selling one-on-one coaching and thought about someone having like an opinion about my price.
Okay.
And then so like anger came up there.
Yeah.
But it hasn't like happened yet.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
like
that's
thought
fine.
about,
That's
yeah, yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's what I said for everybody listening. It could be something that happened to you personally. It could be something that you're anticipating and trying to avoid having happen. It could be something that you witnessed happening to someone else and you had a reaction to. It can be any of these things, right? So when you anticipate this idea of somebody questioning or rejecting what you're putting out there, what do you notice about, again, that feeling in yourself about how much you feel like you have access to love in that moment?
Yeah, it feels like a door is shut.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. And that's why I'm going to that first, because that's going to be, for everybody listening, a helpful thread to go to first, right? Because regardless of what the details are of the moment, that's likely to be a facet of it. Like you
Yeah.
said, that there's this door closed that said, oh, I don't have access to it anymore. So breathe into what that feels like when you believe that that door is closed, that someone else had the power to close it on you, to close it
Hmm.
for you,
Yeah.
and to
It feels
remove your access to love.
it feels like multiple doors closing, where it's like the
Mhm.
first door is that anger or the pain or whatever, and then and more doors close in the rejection of that feeling, meaning like if I express that anger towards what that person says in my mind, and like there are other people around,
Right.
then they're gonna have a pain, and then it's just like a domino effect of like shittiness. And like, yeah, like multiple rejections of love. And this like reminds me of childhood, like having a like like feeling angry about something, some sort of injustice happening, and then other people in the family rejecting me for my anger. So that's kind of, yeah, that's
Exactly.
mhm,
Exactly. So it layers on itself, right? And so
totally does.
that's why always, again, for everybody listening, if you're going to guide yourself through this process or whatever, one of the first steps is always taking a step back and allowing yourself to feel and experience exactly what you're feeling and experiencing, because that's that first layer that we have to peel back. That first door, like you said, that we have to reopen,
Yeah.
is not rejecting the anger itself, the fear itself, the whatever feeling that was being rejected. So on your next breath, go ahead and allow the anger to move however it needs to move. Set it completely free to take up as much space as it needs, to get as intense as it needs to get as loud as it needs to. And as you allow it to move freely like that, now let's bring some more curiosity in and just check to see, at the center of this whole experience of this freely moving anger, at the center of this experience of you being rejected and it feeling like the door to your access to love has been closed, just check to see if that's actually true. Is it possible that there's more love present than what you were noticing? Is it possible that there's love available that you just weren't aware of a moment ago?
Yeah, like when I started to feel into and allow that anger to expand, what image came to mind was this kind of like ferocious animal, like, and like that felt like there was like a burst of love in there, like just like my primal animalistic, like kind of dangerousness that I think that has a freedom and has, been rejected. But then when I started to allow it, it kind of became this, yeah, this like powerful part of me
Yeah.
that made me more interesting and more lovable. Like a flower that is dangerous is like still beautiful, right?
Mhm.
One that like spits venom or like kills you. Yeah.
Exactly. So when you are at peace with your potential dangerousness,
Hmm.
do you notice how safe you actually are?
Yeah, because yeah, that kind of like Amazonian, like warrior animal monkey person is is something that does keep me safe in terms of like actually like it actually does. You know. It actually reminds me, fun story of when I went to a friend's birthday party in on Vancouver Island, and I had never met any of this person's friends before. They were like a group that you know, went to Burning Man and stuff like that. And so I was like, you know, one of the only people there who didn't really know anyone. Anyways, there was this like they had games, and one of the games was like paddling people. And I remember when the women would like paddle their like boyfriends or like whoever, they would be like, and just like not want to hurt the person. And I was like, come on. Like,
Be
come
real.
on,
And
these
that's
bitches.
why I mentioned earlier that the most dangerous person to be around is
Yeah.
one who is suppressing all of that.
Right. Okay, well, then it was my turn. And so I had this paddle, like they gave me this paddle, and this paddle was kind of like a cheese grater type thing. Like it had like it was like thing. And I double-handed like smacked this guy. He fell to the ground and there was like purple welts on his ass. And I was like, "Oh my god, like what did I do?" And I felt so much shame. I felt terrible. And everyone around were like, "What the fuck? Like who is this person?" This crazy person. And then I had this moment because I was on shrooms. So it was like a kind of like an experience, you
Yeah,
know, a full
exactly. So
experience.
you see how that is actually an example of it, because the question
Yeah.
is, what anger had you suppressed before
Oh,
that
so much.
moment, right? That then
So
was
much.
like, ooh, I have this like I have this
You know what's funny
opening.
is that as soon as I did it, the guy who was like right in front of me, he's like, that came from a bad place. But so I was so upset. And then I had this moment where I was like looking into the mirror and I was like, you're just dangerous sometimes. Like you just like whatever. You just have this part of you that, you know, can be dangerous sometimes. And it was like such like a loving moment where there's so many things that just like integrated because of that, even though definitely wouldn't do that again. I
Right.
feel sorry for that guy. He took it well. But yeah.
But that's the thing, right? The more that you now allow the anger to be free, love yourself, and even when anger arises, right, you're actually less likely to end up in a situation like that again,
Mhm.
because there's not this sort of backlog of suppressed anger that's like, ooh, I get to come play now,
I
give me the cheese grater.
I think yeah. I think it was also, and this is something that has also been a pattern of mine, is just not knowing my own strength, like physically not knowing how physically strong, because I'm like, you know, noodle arms, and like I've always been skinny, and so I've had this opinion of myself that I'm like weak or whatever. But yeah, definitely yeah.
Yeah.
Super fun. Yeah, well, that was cool. I've never actually gone through like a embodiment thing live before. That was awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Um I didn't think that we were going to be talking about anger like most of the time, but it makes sense since we're talking about activism and, you know, and also like
Because
it.
usually that's kind of the polarity that goes on, right? Is
Mhm.
that people either feel totally powerless or they're just like foaming at the mouth, right?
Mhm.
Practically, and like trying to rile up the people that feel powerless, and the people that feel powerless are like, I don't, I mean, can we really do anything about this? And
Yeah.
so those two polarities just sort of go back and forth. um and it's not to say that nothing gets done. Obviously things get done, like some things are getting done, but there's much more available when we let ourselves move deeper into a place of love and peace, and um, work from there.
Yeah. And it's also like I don't want to also give the impression that, if you are allowing your anger that you're never going to like make mistakes or it's never going to burst out in, whatever ways.
Oh,
Like
right, exactly. Because
we are
listen,
all
the fact
human.
that exactly everybody was raised on a planet where, and raised by people who were mostly suppressing their feelings, right?
Mhm.
Um, it's super, super, super rare to run into somebody that like is is actually operating completely in the moment, right? And that there's no
Totally.
backlog that's unaddressed,
Mhm.
that there's no
Mhm.
unresolved suppressed stuff going on, right? So
Yeah.
even if you're actively, allowing that openness as much as possible, there might be something that you did that you weren't aware of that suddenly, sprouts up and
Exactly.
catches you off
And
guard in a moment where you're not completely open with it, right? And you get
yeah.
reactive, and that's, it happens.
And for for empaths and people who feel the energies of the earth, right? And of the collective, it might not even be your anger,
Exactly.
right? So I don't want like anyone thinking like, oh, if I make a mistake like that, if I,
I'm so
want
glad
to
you
punch
brought that
someone in the
up,
face at
because
it,
that's another really big reason that it's so incredibly worthwhile to examine and dial back the judgments and assumptions and rejection that we have about all these feelings, right? Because
yeah.
that's a great example. If you're picking up just the collective anger and then you're rejecting it because you're like, oh, I'm supposed to be a dainty flower and not experience anger, you're going to put yourself in a lot of turmoil, because in reality this is looking for a place to somebody to move through and be transmuted in that way. It's looking to move through somewhere where the love and the peace that reside at the center of it can be recognized, right? And as far as that collective stuff, I definitely, I mean, maybe close to 20 years ago, I remember out of the blue sitting down. I can still remember what the carpet looked like that I was sitting on. And I sat for, I don't know, it maybe was hours, and had like what rippled through my body. It was indescribable. It was basically all the pain and agony and suffering and death and violence in the history of the planet, right? It was just
Oh yeah.
like just heads coming off, and it was you know what I mean? And I just sat there
Good
with it,
times.
and it felt like, I don't know, like if you just imagine that you're vomiting, I don't know what to call it even, but after, like, the next day, like I then just sort of like fell asleep after just rolling with that for hours. And then the world I saw when I opened my eyes the next day was completely different, you
Mm,
know?
mm,
So
yeah.
yeah, it's incredibly powerful when you're open to it without it even mattering to you. Is this mine? Is this somebody else's? Is this everybody's? Who
Exactly.
cares?
Exactly. 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 Yeah. There's always more to feel, and every time that you allow yourself to feel is an opportunity for you to experience love and expansion in a way that only really like your stamp of it is yours, and you'll find different pathways open up on your journey that are meant for you. We all have different experiences, we all have different histories, and just in my own experience, like just what we just did there, of feeling those doors close and remembering like, oh, like that's why that like internal, imagery of experience was happening. It's like that's me, but for you it might be completely different,
Exactly.
and what opens up as a result of that is completely different.
Yeah.
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 And that's
And
why it's so amazing if we all do this work, because we all get to make our mark in the world in our own way.
yeah. And everybody gets to bring their note, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is another place where I've seen spiritual seekers get a little bit lost in the past, is they get hooked onto this like oneness, we're all one, we're all whatever. And that is true. And simultaneously, you are completely unique, right? So that oneness, like if you imagine we're all like, you know how when you look through a kaleidoscope and you turn it and the pieces shift, and that's what makes this incredible design. The light coming through that kaleidoscope, that is universal. There's a level of it that's universal to all of us, right? But then that exact facet that we bring to how that light looks as it's expressed is unique to every single person. And it would be, so the analogy I like to use, because I love sound so much, is when you're listening to an orchestra play a symphony, right? What is it that makes that beautiful? What makes it like, it on one hand, it's all one, right? Because it's all a sound wave occurring.
Mm-hmm.
But the beauty comes from each different instrument with its own tone, playing the different notes that it plays. That's what the beauty is. The flute, if the flute sounded like violins, then we'd be missing part of it. If they were all playing the same note, then it would be a dial tone.
Yeah.
You probably don't, you don't know dial tones maybe, but there, back when we used to pick up the phone and it would go burr.
Yeah.
That would
No,
be,
I remember
be a
that.
symphony if we had no no variety of notes and instruments. And so that's what's so incredibly beautiful, is that we're all bringing this universal oneness that is the same, that is untouchable, that is changeless, that is universal, and bringing it through this unique expression that only you can bring and no one else can. And it's staggeringly beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I think that's a good place to end.
All right. An invitation to everyone to bring their note.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to bring, and love is what animates the instrument, and to bring that note through in the most beautiful way.
What makes that note louder, and what allows other notes to harmonize with you.
Yeah.
And your note doesn't take away from another person's note because they're playing a different note.
Exactly. That's the beauty.
Exactly. Cool.
Gorgeous. Well, thank you for putting this together and having me here. This was a real delight to have this conversation.
Totally. So much fun. Loved it.
Great.
Okay. Talk to
All
you guys
right.
later.
Bye, everyone.